The thing about being a neurodivergent is that people need us way more than they think they do. They need neurodivergence. Neurotypicals need neurodivergence. Even though sometimes neurotypicals can try to act as if they don't need neurodivergence, they can probably claim that they don't or even say that they don't. They actually do need us. Okay? Let me tell you why. So the thing is that neurodivergence, we are different. We are vastly different when it comes to our interactions and how we socialize with people, because our socializations with people are more personal. Okay, it's very personal with the person that we're interacting with. But neurotypicals, they tend to more so go off of pattern and repetition. And when they're continuing to go on this pattern, when they come across a person that breaks that pattern, because they got so used to being in this pattern, and they come across someone that's different, that's breaking the pattern, that makes the neurotypical feel funny. It's like, it's different. Like, they have to break their pattern. They don't know how to, breaking the pattern, they don't always know how to respond, or they don't know how to always react. So a lot of times their reaction to us, to neurodivergence, after they done had 2 dozen, 3 dozen neurotypicals in a row, and they've been a part of that same pattern, and they come across a neurodivergent, a person that is communicating, socializing, interacting with them differently, the first thing that sometimes what they will do is they will react to us. They will react differently. Okay, they will react to the neurodivergent. And sometimes the reaction is not the most pleasant reaction. Sometimes that reaction can be a lot of, like, what they'll do is the neurotypical will like unleash their fire, especially if they were already, like, when they were going through this pattern and they had their own things going on within themselves, like they had their own personal issues, their own, their own personal problems in their own personal life. Or they could be in some type of, they could personally not feel good, like they could be sick, or they could be in pain, whatever, or they could physically be in pain, they could be physically sick. Whatever the case is, if they are dealing with anything personal or physical, it's going to create a momentum of energy. And when a neurotypical is having that energy being surged, and they're constantly being around neurotypicals that are, where they have to just be in this pattern where it's not personal, they feel, and a lot of times when they are within that pattern, a lot of times the neurotypical doesn't feel very much seen. They don't feel very much heard, because it's not personal. It's very surface level. It's just putting on an act. It's just basically just being in this pattern. And people, when they have the pattern, they know how to react. They know how to respond. They know how to act, because they're portraying a character, acting off of the pattern. But when a neurotypical comes across a neurodivergent and they are a breakage of that pattern, they don't know how to react. They don't know how to respond. So their response or the reaction to the neurodivergent is going to be different, because they are different. And sometimes that reaction or that response could be a not so good reaction or response. It could be a bit unpleasant. And it could really be unpleasant if that neurotypical was gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of surge of energy. And the more that they had to keep putting this energy off and suppressing it and putting it down, and everything was just bubbling up on top of each other, it was just like the bubble getting ready to burst, or the boil getting ready to burst. It was like a volcano ready to erupt. There was just so much energy, so much that was there, that finally when a neurotypical comes across a neurodivergent, after they done been through with 2 to 3 dozen neurotypicals, and they've had to go with this pattern, they've had to react and respond and be a certain way, and they had to portray a certain character, and they're able to know what their next response or reaction is going to be, they're able to go off of that pattern. It's a bit easier for them. So they're able to hide it. They're able to suppress it. Like, they can do what they have to do, but when it comes to dealing with their personal life, they've been suppressing it and pushing it, that eventually it's going to bubble up to the surface. And when they're around the neurodivergent, when they interact with the neurodivergent is different. So requires a different response and reaction. And sometimes when that surge of energy comes, that reaction or response is very fiery. It's a lot of heat. They unleash their fire, and they unleash a lot of that heat. And when they unleash that heat on the neurodivergent, because the neurodivergent they have been through the fire, they can endure the fire, they can take that fire, they can take that heat, and they won't be blown away by it. They won't take that heat personally. They can handle it, they can put up with it. And because that neurodivergent can handle it, it doesn't go any further and to stir up any type of conflict. Because they can handle that heat, and they realize that this fire that was unleashed is nothing personal to them, but it's personal to the person that is unleashing the fire. They're like, no, this ain't about me, this is about you. You got something else going on. Okay, go ahead and deal with that. And what happens is, like, it stops with us. It stops with the neurodivergent. It stops here. It doesn't go personal where it leads into conflict, and now you have this conflict that's arising and everything just blows out of proportion. No. It stops with the neurodivergent because they haven't taken it personally. And because they haven't taken it personally, it stops here. And when it stops here, and a lot of times we can have no reaction or no response, because 90% of communication is nonverbal, and it's not, a lot of times we go just very nonverbal, and we have a poker face. So when this happens, it requires the neurotypical to look at themselves, to face themselves, to deal with themselves, because at that point all they have left to do is look at themselves. Because if we're not giving a reaction or a response, they have to find a reaction or response. They have to deal with themselves. So what happens is it does help them to emotionally regulate, because they unleashed a lot of that heat, but in the process it works in their favor because they can unleash that heat without anything backlashing at them in the present moment. They're allowed to be themselves, be authentically and raw themselves in that moment. But it also helps them to correct themselves. They can look at themselves, look at their behavior, correct their energy, correct themselves, and come correct to the neurodivergent, and come correct to everybody following the neurodivergent. So, like, because the thing is, the neurodivergent is meeting the neurotypical where they are at. Here is the neurodivergent, here is the neurotypical. It's like crashing, but here's the neurotypical trying to crash. The neurodivergent stops it right here, comes to a halt, comes to a pause, comes to a complete stop. The neurodivergent meets you where you're at. So it requires the neurotypical to meet themselves where they are at. That's why when neurotypicals come across the neurodivergent, it stops with us. Whatever energy they were in, it stops with us, because we are the stop and the restart. But they have to go through us in order to restart, and they have to correct themselves. So neurodivergents, we come into people's lives to help correct them. We come in to help correct these neurotypicals so they can correct themselves. They go through us, they correct themselves, and they come correct going forward. And the thing is, it sucks because it's like, damn, we gotta sometimes play the role of the punching bag, because we are not a punching bag, but we sometimes do have to play the role of the punching bag. Why? Because neurodivergents are more emotionally mature. We are the most emotionally mature beings on this planet, because neurotypicals are not as emotionally mature as neurodivergents are. Yes, neurotypicals can excel in other parts of their life. They can be smart, successful, wise, knowledgeable. They can, be more mature when it comes to social situations. However, on an emotional level, they lack that emotional maturity. A lot of them do. While neurodivergents have such strong emotional maturity where we don't take the heat. We don't absorb the heat. The heat is not stinging us. We're not like singed by the heat, because we can take it, because we have been through so much shit. We have been through so much fire that we can take when fire is being thrown at us. It's like, oh, we can acknowledge, that's hot. That's a lot of fire. That's a lot of heat. But we're not blown away. We can stand it. We can take it. So because we can take it, it helps other people to deal with themselves and correct themselves. That's why neurodivergents are the strongest people on this planet, and that's why neurotypicals need us. They need us to emotionally regulate. But the assholes take advantage of that shit and do shit on purpose. But it's different when it's like warm-hearted neurotypical that's just having a bad day, that just unleashes their heat on a neurodivergence because they're